Okay, right, well, we might as well get started. So thank you all for coming this morning to the second day of the Cambridge Open Days and the Sidney Sussex College session. This morning, we've got a whole bunch of things lined up, but for the first 45 minutes of today, we are going to be having a Q&A session with some of our wonderful undergraduate students. So it's a great pleasure to welcome them along as well. We'll get to introductions in a minute. But first, I will say who I am. I am Stuart Palmer. I'm the School Liaison Officer at Sidney Sussex. That just means I go around talking to schools, to teachers, to parents, to students about university, about Cambridge, and everything in between. I also teach and supervise in history here at Sidney because I am a historian as well. So yeah, that's what I do. And I'll be chairing the sessions this morning. After this, we're going to be talking to our Arts and Humanities Directors of Studies at 10:15, and then at 11 o'clock, we're doing an interview question workshop. But as I say, first off, we are talking to our students. So just for housekeeping, we are recording the session. No one in the audience will be in any way recorded, like your names or questions, anything like that. That is not getting recorded, so don't worry about that. In order to ask questions to us, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, the box that says Q&A. There is also a chat box, but don't use that unless you have specific messages that you want to communicate to us. But if you have questions, use the Q&A box. You can ask them anonymously or with your name, whatever you would rather. And yeah, we will get to the questions as we go through, but please do enter those whenever you want. And I think that's about everything. The other thing, if you do want to come and go, you can. The same Zoom link will work multiple times. So if you need to leave and come back at any point, that is absolutely fine. So that is fine. Cool, right, we will get to some introductions then. So we'll go alphabetically, which means Jenny, over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Jenny. I have just graduated from History and Politics and I'm from Nottingham.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie. I've just finished my first year at Sidney studying classics.
Hi, I'm Lizzie. I've just done a year of basically biology and chemistry in BioNatsky.
Hi everyone, my name's Shadar. I'm a second year medic here at Sidney.
Hi, I'm Rosie. I'm from York and I've just graduated from studying history at Sidney.
Hi, I'm Tom. I'm from Kent and I've just finished first year studying English.
Great stuff. Great stuff, guys. So as you can see, we've got a really great array of subjects represented here, year groups. So as I say, any questions you have about subjects, studying, applications, whatever it might be, feel free to ask. So a good place to start, I think, for any discussion like this is how did you pick your college? Because this is something that I think a lot of students struggle with. It's something we get asked about a lot. And I think there's always a lot of different experiences represented by different undergrads, because this is a very idiosyncratic process. So how did you guys pick your college? Was your first pick Sidney? And if not, what have you got to say on this topic? Does anyone want to give us some thoughts on this? Go for it, Katie, you can start us off.
Okay, yes. So Sidney was my first choice. I really struggled to pick because a lot of the colleges seemed like amazing. So when I was trying to pick, I kind of had a list of things that I felt were important for me. So I looked at like size and like location. I wanted to be quite central. And yeah, so I kind of had this like list and I did a lot of research online to kind of shorten the list. And then because it was pre-COVID, I did manage to go around and look at the colleges and kind of get an idea of what they were like. And Sidney gave out free ice cream on the open day, and then I decided I wanted to go to Sidney. So yeah, that was for me. But when I got down to the like final like 5 to 10 like colleges, I would honestly have been happy studying at any of them. So they are, you know, there are differences, but there's a lot of similarities, and it's not something that you know, is going to define your life too much. It's not something to stress about too much.
Definitely not something to stress about. But I mean, that was a good example of making lists, being quite methodical about it. Was anyone less methodical about it, or more just instinctual, or is everyone? Rosie?
I tried to be methodical. I made spreadsheets, which I've been told is not unique or weird. But so I kind of, because I knew I wanted like central and not huge and all of that. But Sydney's open day fell on a weekend that I had off from work. I was on a gap year. And so I came along just not necessarily expecting it to be the one, and kind of met my DOS now and quite a few others, and obviously the students, and it was just talking to people and how friendly they were that made me feel like Sydney was the one. It was, yeah, it just felt like it just clicked rather than trying to make lists.
Nice. Tom or Lizzie, did you, either of you as your first year, did you go to the virtual open days? Or?
I was gonna say I definitely didn't, because I was pooled to Sydney. So I originally applied to Pembroke. I mean, Sydney was in the last couple that I had, but I really wasn't as methodical as the rest of you guys. I was like, these ones are too big. These ones are too far away. I've got like 12 left. And it was kind of, I don't know, not random, but there were a couple of guiders, like what my friends had said or people that I knew. But it was kind of perhaps wrongly a lot based on the stereotypes of what other people had said. As in, like, my friends had said, well, in my year, there were a lot of people at one place that were like this. And that's a lot of what mine was based on, which I don't know whether that's the best way to go about it. But as it was, kind of like Katie said, I don't think it really made that much difference. I had control over which I applied to, but I didn't have any control as to where I ended up, but it hasn't really done me badly, so I wouldn't worry.
Yeah, I also didn't apply direct to Sydney. I applied to Emmanuel, but then yeah, I think with the pool, wherever you end up, you just end up loving the college, and I couldn't see myself if I had to kind of go back and reapply to Cambridge, I would 100% apply to Sydney. And I think you do, definitely find community and end up loving wherever you are. I think that's quite nice.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, I think quite a lot of students come through the pool at every college pretty much. And yeah, I think if you asked 20 students what the best college was, all 20 would say whatever college they're at, regardless of how they got there probably. So yeah, great, thanks guys. I mean, now that we're on the subject of Sydney, and a few people have mentioned it being central, does anyone want to expand a bit on what it's like studying their subject at Sydney, in terms of like how close it is to your faculties, what it feels like being a medic, a classic student, whatever it might be. Shada, you've got your hand.
Yeah, so I do medicine, and there are around 9 to 10 medics a year in Sydney. We are 10 steps away, I think, from Sainsbury's, and 7 minutes, I'd say, I can leg it in 5 to all of my lectures in the first 3 years. So we're quite central, and you're never too late. Even if you wake up like really late, you can make it to the lecture, you can make it to the practical. But it does mean that you don't have an excuse of turning up late to anything. And then in the last 3 years of medicine, you get moved to a house closer to the hospitals and to like the clinical school. So you're always close to whatever you need to.
Great, Jenny?
Yeah, I could probably add from a humanities perspective. So I do history and politics. It tends to be quite a small cohort in Sydney. So there's usually maybe 1 to 2 HISPOLs in your year, but that's only because history and politics is quite a small subject across the university. And also you kind of get adopted by the historians, as Rosie will vouch for, within Sydney, which is really nice. On a kind of day-to-day basis, you don't have as many contact hours as the medics or the scientists, but you have your lectures traditionally at the Sidrick site, and it's maybe a sort of 10-minute cycle or 20-minute walk, but it's a really nice walk, so I always found it was quite a nice way to start my day. And then you also spend quite a lot of time in the college library, where you can get basically all of the books you would need in first year are there. A lot of the books you need at any point in your degree are there if you ask Alan the librarian nicely. And you also spend a lot of time at the faculty library. So yeah, a lot of time jumping between different libraries to get all the books you need, and then working wherever you want. So the college gardens, the library, your room, throughout the week as well.
Great, thank you, Jenny. It is a nice walk to the Citric site. So great, yeah, that's really useful. Katie, have you got anything to say about being classics? Because classics is quite a small degree, right? Do you ever feel, go for it.
So there's not there's not many of us classicists. I think there's 90 in my year, which for kind of a university cohort is quite small, but I don't think it's the smallest. At Sydney, we're quite lucky. I have 3 people in my year, which is quite nice because it means when you have your supervision, so your small group teaching where it'll be 1 academic and then usually a very small number of students, it means that it's not a one-on-one thing. You get to be with 2 other people, which means especially in the first year, it's a lot less pressure, and it's just quite nice to kind of get to know other people. And the college is really good in that you kind of get to know the people who are doing classics in the years above you. So you get taken out to dinner with the classicists and you have some events with people in the different year groups. So like when I was trying to choose what I wanted to study for my second year, I've been able to message people in the year above who I know did certain courses. But yeah, no, classics, I think at Sydney is really lovely. The librarian is a classicist. So the library is like really, really well stocked for like classics books. Like I took home 20 books over the holidays. So it has a lot. And yeah, I think it's a good size that there's other people who do your subject, but that it's not kind of overcrowded or anything. So I really like it, but it is one of those things that it's a bit harder to get to know everyone in your course, because like there's like less people at each college, so you can't get to know like a lot of people who do English. So it's kind of one of those things that you have to get involved in, like classics events or different bits and pieces to get to know people. But yeah, I really love Sydney for classics. I think it's really lovely.
Brilliant. A really interesting question that sort of bookends quite nicely with that one has just come in about, do you get the opportunity to discuss ideas with others? I don't know if that means people on other courses or others within your own course, but we can talk about that. Let's go Tom and then Lizzie.
So kind of more specifically within Sydney, we've got 6 of us in our cohort for English, and definitely there's so much, particularly with English being kind of a subject where discussion with your peers is very much kind of central to it. We do a lot of kind of going into SIG gardens and talking through kind of peer assessment. And I think that is a massive part of what I've loved about the course this year, is that there is so much opportunity to work with other people who are just as kind of passionate about the same things, and you can kind of bounce off each other. And that in a way is also great preparation for supervisions, because you know, definitely for English, that's a lot of it is discussion based. And so there is definitely in my subject a lot of kind of space for that, and we're all kind of through that, we've all become really good friends. We get on really well within the subject, and yeah, I think yeah, Sydney's great for
that. I'd say for science, well, for natural sciences, I don't know, are we the largest cohort? Because by the time you've got the physicists, the chemists, and we all come under the natural sciences, but we're definitely amongst the largest. And you tend to find yourself separated either as a Bionatsky or a Phyznatsky. But because we all kind of come under one bracket, it does mean that we all still know each other. And I think there might be 17 or 18 in my year of both combined. So, and a lot of our modules also overlap. So if you're a Bionatsky, you will often do modules, 1 or 2 modules that Phyznatskys do, which means there's always quite a big group of people that you can just be like, oh, has anyone done this question sheet? Because I'm really struggling with some of the concepts or whatever. So something that I've really liked is that we have a group chat for every single module. So I've ended up with a lot of group chats, but each of them are very specific. So I can be absolutely sure that if I message this group chat of 8 or 9 people about a specific maths question, that there will be someone in there who we can meet up in the gardens or whatever, and go through things. And it's also meant that when we're doing supervisions, there's quite well, I haven't had supervisions with the same people every time, which has meant that I've actually got to know a lot of people and worked with different people. I think even if you know people, and even if you're friends with them, working with different people is often a very different experience. And I've learned quite quickly who the people are to go for certain things and what you can add to each discussion. So I think that's been quite a nice thing to discover this year.
Great, thanks, guys. I mean, that's one of the great things about uni in general, is just that sharing of ideas with peers and colleagues and lecturers. But I think, you know, at Cambridge, in the college environment, it's almost even more so, because you've got this small community of people studying lots of different subjects, and it's a wonderful place to share ideas, develop things. So yeah, good stuff. We've had a couple of questions about directors of studies, which is a fun topic to discuss with students. So the question is, how important is the director of studies, which I think we should take on its own. But then there's a follow-up, which is it best to have a director of studies whose specific subject interests overlap with yours? So should we start with the first bit? And if anyone has anything to say on that second part, please do. Katie, then Shadha.
Yes, so I was also going to answer the second part. So I had a look at, I really liked my director of studies when I met him at the open day. He was really lovely. Well, to be fair, I met who I thought was going to be my director of studies, and I thought, great, we both like the same thing. We both like archaeology and this particular like period of Greece, and I thought that was really great. And then it turns out he was actually my director of studies for part 2 and not for part 1. So he will supervise me when I'm in my 3rd year. He will be my director of studies, but for the first 2 years I have a different director of studies. So I thought I'd been like really clever and set this up so that I'd have someone who shares my interests, and it turns out I'd completely messed up. But it doesn't matter at all. I had a new director of studies who'd started at Sydney that year, so there would have been no way of knowing what, you know, she specialized in. So the director of studies is a really important role as someone who kind of oversees what you study, and is your kind of point of contact within the department. My director of study also does some of my supervisions, and if I have any kind of like academic issues, or if I'm struggling, I know I can go to her. But yes, I mean, I thought it would be great to have a director of studies whose subject overlaps with mine. And to be fair, I will say I found that for my interview, because I had mentioned in my personal statement this specific period of Greek history, and I knew that he really liked it, we did of course talk about that period. So if there is some kind of overlap, it might be that that's something you talk about, it might be that it isn't, but it really isn't something you should worry about too much. I think there are a lot of other things that are more important than kind of making sure that you find someone who has your exact interest, not least of which because your interest probably will shift and change as you kind of learn new topics and cover new things. So I wouldn't kind of worry too much about the details of that, if that makes sense.
Great, thank you, Katie. Go for it, Shadha.
Right. I don't think I can do uni without my director of studies. I genuinely don't know how other people in other unis do it. They're always at hand to help you with things. I come from a family full of engineers, so no one is a medic. No one knows what medicine is like. And just to have that point of contact when you first arrive as someone who's close to you, who understands. And as Katie said, you will learn things through your degree and your interests will change. I mean, I came in interested in cancer, and then turned out interested in like the development of the embryo. So they're completely different things. And even if you read through the website and like the introductions of each supervisor, each director of studies, they are not going to list everything they've done through their life. Like I found out my director of studies in first year is an orthopedic surgeon, but he doesn't list that he is doing a PhD in like cancer research. And it's just a great thing to just have discussions about. So you'll find out people do more than what the websites say. Yeah.
Rosie, then Jenny.
Yeah, so I guess it's quite similar to what Katie and Shata have said, in that your DOS is super important, but whatever your interests are, they will have something that kind of aligns with yours. And as it changes, I mean, I've finished my history degree and I can safely say that I am not a historian of a specific period or time, and therefore it doesn't necessarily overlap with either of my DOSes. But I think if you come across somebody who at an open day or something, that you really get a feel for the fact that I mean, all DOSes care, but if there's something that makes you think like, I would really love this person to get them to know this person, for them to kind of supervise me, I would say that's almost more important, because they are so widely read, and there will always be something that they can kind of connect with you about. And I think for history as well, like we have one-on-one supervisions, and your DOS is responsible for finding your supervisor. And I know at Sydney, we get emailed super early about what papers we want to take, so that our DOSes can look out for like really eminent or great supervisors for us for each paper. And they really take a lot of time over that. And as Chantal said, I don't think you could do a Cambridge degree without your DOS. I'm doing a master's next year. And my mom said, so who's going to be your DOS? And I was like, oh, well, you don't have one, you have a supervisor. And she was like, well, who's going to look after you? Like, what's going to happen? So they're really important, but also don't stress over finding like the perfect match to your current like sixth form interests.
Go for it, Jenny.
Yeah, I think some of it's kind of been said, but I just wanted to pick up on the thing about whether you should pick a DOS based on your interests, because I remember hearing a lot of rumours before I came to uni about trying to kind of tailor your interests to what you think the academics want. And I guess just from my experience, write on your personal statement what you're genuinely interested in, because that will come across. And as I think we've all said, over the 3 years, it's likely your interests will change anyway. And something I found, because I do joint honours, so history and politics, my DOS is a historian. Well, I have two DOSes, but the one I often would speak to is a historian. And often I'd speak to him about a politics paper, which actually is not something that he studied specifically. And yet, I guess the point of a DOS is that they're so interested in your academic development that you end up having these really quite fun, interesting conversations about things that might not be specifically what they've studied, but they've probably read something because that's what they're like. Or if they haven't, they're really keen to hear about it. So I would say really just think about what you genuinely care about, because that authentic interest will come across, rather than trying to sort of fit yourself into what you think a DOS wants at Cambridge, because there probably isn't actually an idea of what they want to see.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you. Thanks, Jenny. Great. That was a really good discussion. Just, I mean, because we're kind of on DOS subject now, we can quickly do supervisions, because the questions come in about specifically about medic supervisions, how many people are in them. But very quickly, Shada, do you mind answering that, but also just giving a brief discussion of what a supervision is and what they do?
Yeah, so supervisions are, as Katie said earlier, they're small group teaching. So you have an academic who's interested in the module or the paper that you're taking, and then sort of 1 to 4-ish students, and you meet every week. Well, in the case of like the medicine supervisions, we meet every week for every paper. So in medicine, in first year, biochems, you usually go with like the harder subjects, or I guess the ones that need more discussion and more speaking from the supervisor are usually larger, and then the ones that are actually more factual. So the supervisor is going to push you more. So biochemistry, for example, they're smaller, but the largest supervision I've ever had is like 4 people in the supervision, and that was anatomy. But anatomy is just based on facts, and there isn't really much. So they tend to do larger supervisions for anatomy, and then smaller ones for biochemistry, physiology, and then like pharmacology. So 2 to 4. Sometimes you do one-on-one, but it's rare in medicine to do a one-on-one.
Great, thank you, Shada. Yeah, I think it's more common well, certainly in all the history supervisions I do, they're one-on-one. And I don't know, Tom, what is the English supervision numbers like?
We usually have supervisions in pairs. So there is somebody to kind of bail you out if you're not entirely sure, on a certain question, and you can kind of bounce off each other again. But it's really nice. It's fairly relaxed, and yeah, there's not a supervision that I haven't come out of thinking, oh my god, wow, my mind's blown. So I think yeah, I think they're my favourite thing about the kind of teaching, definitely.
Yeah, I think all the colleges do it slightly differently, all the subjects do it slightly differently, but for the most part, 2-on-1, 1-on-1, sometimes a few more, but yeah, they're really great. Tom, while we're on that, I think we can do a quick bit on applications, and a question's coming about any personal statement tips for English. If you have any, feel free, but don't really need to be too specific.
Well, I think the specificity is, I think, the key. Not just kind of listing like some of your interests, but maybe floating an argument that perhaps you feel quite strongly about. If there's something that you feel very comfortable talking about and excited to talk about, the interviewer will often take those kind of introductions to arguments as kind of springboards. Definitely that happened in my interview as kind of springboards to then have a discussion. And so if you've got things in there that you are really passionate about, I think then that passion is more likely to come through. And then also kind of not just focusing on your A-level set texts or whatever, and kind of expanding beyond that and the things that you've done outside of class and those books rather than the things you studied in school. And so maybe you've come across a different type of literary theory or something that you wouldn't cover at A-level. Just evidence that you've kind of gone beyond the syllabus, I think, is quite important.
Great tips, thanks, Tom. Yeah, make it about you, make it about what you love, but yeah, going beyond is always good. Cool. While we're on that subject of like applications, Tom has mentioned interviews and how things you put in your personal statement come up at interviews sometimes. Does anyone want to talk a bit about what the interview was like for your particular subject? It's a very common question that we got. Does anyone have anything they want to share? Lizzie, that was a quick hand.
So, as I said, my interview wasn't with Sidney, Director of Studies, and I think what's I've discovered since is that there is quite a range in how the NatSci interviews, natural sciences interviews, are conducted. Because for mine, I essentially chose what subjects I was. Well, one of my interviews, because you generally have two, I think. One of mine was almost entirely led by me, in that I walked in and the interviewer was sort of like, so what have you studied recently? What do you want to talk about? And I just had to talk for like 3 or 4 minutes on my own with a little bit of help, but I set up the subject that I chose to talk about. And then he would take it further and be like, so hypothetically, if this was, instead of happening in a fish, this was happening in a mammal, how would that differ? So it was very led by me. And then he did also try and throw me off a little bit, in that he just handed me a skull and was like, what do you think this animal, what animal do you think this is? And it's very much like you can't really prepare for that other than feeling comfortable about what you know. If you are happy with, confident in what you can talk about, when you get a skull, you can be like, well, I suppose it's quite large, so it's not going to be a shrew or a mouse or something. So the best thing you can do is literally talk about everything that goes through your head, because they're looking for the thought process. So they're not trying to give you questions that you do not have the capacity to answer. They're giving you questions that you won't have seen before, and it's about how you approach that. So talking through everything that you have is sort of the biggest thing I say to any incoming student that I ever talk to, is you need to show your thought processes. So yeah.
Great. Rosie, then Katie.
Yeah, so obviously history is a bit different. I mean, it's been a while since I did my interviews, but talking to everyone, I think they're the same. So they are essentially, you have 2 interviews, and one will be with, at Sidney anyway, one is generally with 2 of the history fellows more generally, and one is with both the history DOSs. which, to answer somebody's question, you can't choose your DOS, but there are different ones for part 1 and part 2 often in some subjects. So we have one for part 1 and one for part 2. So the first interview with the 2 history fellows is kind of source-based, and they set you like something to read generally beforehand, and then you discuss it basically. And it's, as Lizzie said, they're trying to ask you to think rather than what you know. So one of the fellows actually said in my interview, you know, I am Wikipedia, ask me whatever you want. I knew nothing about Irish history. So I used him as a resource and kind of talked it through in that way, rather than panicking that I didn't know anything about Irish history, which I initially did. But and then the second interview with the DOSes was more on stuff that I had just submitted and written. So I know for some people it was about what was in their personal statement. For me, it was about some of the essays that I'd submitted in advance, and it just kind of depends on what they want to pick up on and think is good to discuss with you from what you've written. So it's just being prepared to talk about the kind of arguments you touched on in either the essays or the personal statement, I think.
Perfect. Yes, so in terms of kind of interviews for classics, it's a little bit different. So I had 3 interviews and 1 exam all on the same day, which was very busy. So for classics, you do 2 interviews at your college, and then you have an interview with another college. Which I think is because it's a very small subject. In order to make sure that they kind of have equity between different colleges, they just make you do one with someone else. I did 2 interviews with Sydney and 1 interview with St John's, which I didn't pick at all. I was randomly assigned it. So I found for interviews, as you know, we've kind of been saying, thinking out loud is the biggest thing. I was terrified as kind of a humanities student, because there is kind of an endless supply of things you could need to know. And I remember I looked up questions online for my interviews, and that was a terrible mistake, because I found so many questions that weren't based on things that I have studied. So I thought, oh no, I've been asked what I think was the cause of the fall of the Roman Republic, and that's not something I've studied, so I have no idea. But the idea is that in your interviews, the people interviewing you are not trying to trip you up. They're going to be talking about things that you find interesting and just trying to push that and find out, you know, what you can discuss and your potential. So don't kind of be terrified that you're going to be thrown questions that you have no ability to answer. They're not going to do that. There would be no point in that. So, you know, I was really scared for my interview, but you know, you don't need to be. And I had quite a range. One of mine was focused on literature, one of them was focused on archaeology, and one of them was focused, my St John's one was very different to the other 2. So as people have said, again, between colleges, it also varies quite a lot, the kind of things you'll cover. And it's just kind of, you know, knowing what you've written on your personal statement. Like, do you make sure that if you've put a book on it, you are happy, you've read it and you're happy to discuss it. But yeah, that's, you know, my advice. And I did just want to add one thing I know there was the question, can you choose your DOS? I think when people talk about choosing your DOS, it's one of the ways that people choose a college is based on looking at the DOSes at each college and seeing what they specialize in. So when people say like choosing a DOS, it's more choosing a college, and then at that college you'll get the DOS. So but yeah, no, you can't choose your specific DOS. But yeah, that's my answer.
Brilliant, thank you, Katie. It is worth noting while we're on interviews, all interviews for 2022 entry, so anyone that will be applying this coming admissions round, so this October, they will all be online again. So everything interview-wise will be online, similarly with admissions assessments and things like that. So things like AT interview assessments will all be online. Yeah, so that's just to clarify that. But that won't change the actual, content or the way that they're run. They will just be online rather than in person. Katie, while we've got you, because the questions come in about studying small subjects, which we did talk a bit about earlier, but yeah, Mac is thinking about applying for land economy at Sydney, which is obviously a small degree. So do you have any words of advice for that?
Yeah, so I think having a small cohort like isn't a bad thing at all. I think it can often be kind of quite intimidating to look at certain colleges and think, oh, they've only got this number of spaces, or you know, should I apply here or should I apply to a college that, you know, takes more people? And I think absolutely apply to the college that you feel is right, because if you're at you know, if you do really well and the college doesn't have space, you might just be pooled, so you might get put in a different college. In terms of a small cohort, I mean, I think there are kind of not necessarily disadvantages, but things that are different. So I take some of my supervisions, I have one-on-one now, because I chose to, you know, choose 2 specific topics that the other 2 Sidney classicists didn't want to study. So that means like when I do my linguistics work, that's just a one-on-one thing. So I will say it means that when you start to specialize, your groups will be very small. But that's actually been a really good thing this year. So I had some in-person lectures, which I don't think many people had this year, because of a cohort of 90, about 20 people chose to do this topic. So having a very small group of people actually meant that you could have in-person lectures. So that was actually a really good thing. So I think there are going to be kind of benefits and perhaps things that you kind of feel like you don't maybe get as much of because it's a small subject, but actually going from kind of sixth form and, you know, no one else caring about classics, or, you know, if I was in your position, probably not many people would kind of know that much about land economy. Suddenly going somewhere where there's anybody who cares about it and who you can talk to about it is already a really big jump. So it won't feel like you're kind of isolated. It will be really nice, and you will have a community of people who study what you study.
Brilliant, thanks. Jenny, anything to add?
Yeah, so I do history and politics, and the average number in Sydney is 1 to 2 students. And I guess I just wanted to say, I remember seeing that statistic on the Sydney website and thinking I would be silly to apply to Sydney. There are literally 2 spots. That feels so personal. And I'm so glad I did, because I think, first of all, as Katie explained, don't let the statistics put you off, because actually you could still be pooled. So it doesn't really make any difference. Although it is intimidating when you see that number, you've got just as good a chance at any college to get into the university. And we said earlier that you'll end up being happy at any college. And then in terms of the actual experience of it, it's probably just worth saying that you'll make friends on your course. And I found, because there are only, I think, 38 people in my whole year that do HISPOL across the university, and therefore most people are by themselves in a college or with one other. It means that we have quite a strong sense of community as a subject, and I actually have really enjoyed that and found that I've had a lot of friends in other colleges. And I think that speaking to people who do NatSci, for example, I don't know if this is universally true, but I get the impression that their subject friends tend to be in college and they have that community there, and I have it outside of college. And I don't think there's necessarily a right option, but I just say, don't feel like you'll just be like doing this degree by yourself with no one to talk to, because you will find people and other people will be in the same situation.
Brilliant, thanks guys, that's really useful advice. Cool, my God, we've only got 5 minutes left and we haven't talked about accommodation yet, so we should probably get to that. So yeah, Zachary's asked about how does the accommodation system work, would be a good place to start. And then the specific question is, do you still have access to something like a kitchen if you would like it? So shall we just quickly talk about how you're allocated rooms and what they're like? Shada, please go.
Yeah, so in your first year before you arrive, you're randomly allocated a room in the freshers only areas, or mostly freshers in the areas that you're going to live in. And the further away you're going to ever live away from Sydney is like 5 minutes, which is one of the freshers accommodation blocks. Everyone will have access to what we call a JIP. So it's sort of a kitchen with a kettle, a microwave, so everything that you need except like a hob. And it's not bad because we have an amazing catering staff who they do lunch and dinner and breakfast most days. And then in second year and third year, you ballot with a group of friends, so you can choose to ballot with up to 4 people. And then it's a random ballot, so they just randomly allocate people a number, and then you just pick from the rooms that are available. And then the ballot reverses in third year. So if you were at the bottom of the ballot in second year picking your room, you become at the top of the ballot. I think in second year and third year, you're more likely to get a kitchen, but like it's not the end of the day. I didn't have a kitchen in my first year and it was absolutely fine. The catering staff are really accommodating. I had problems with like halal food and I wanted to ask questions at the start of the first year, and they were all really happy to talk with me and like provide everything that I need.
Great, thanks, Shada. Lizzie, anything to add?
Just that my experience, so I was in Cromwell Court, which is the one that's furthest from Sydney, basically. But having said that, I sing in the choir, I'm a choral scholar, and which means I have rehearsals quite a few nights a week at college, and I can dash the distance to college in about a minute and a half. So it's I've done it several times, and it's not the end of the world. But my experience of being in Cromwell Court was that before we started, there was already a group chat of like pretty much everyone in the block, which I don't know, there are about 13 flats and there are about 5 people in each. So it's quite big. There's quite a lot of freshers there. And we already knew, we got a chance to talk to each other and with the people in our flat in Cromwell Court. And these are the people you're going to be living with, and they're all in the same situation as you. So the fact that there were lots of freshers was quite reassuring, because, you know, when we had Freshers Week, which was slightly different, I imagine, compared to other years, but the events we went to as flat, and we got to know each other through college run events, and just because we could talk to each other beforehand. So it's quite intimidating knowing that you don't really have any control over where you're going to live in first year, but I don't think it's as bad as it first appears, because wherever you go, you'll be with other freshers in exactly the same situation, and you will get to meet other people from your subject, from, you know, having same interests. You both roll out of bed at 6 o'clock to do rowing or something. Like, there are ways that you will meet people, so accommodation isn't the be all and the end all.
Brilliant, thank you, Lizzie. Right, welcome to the tossers who have joined. We'll get to that Q&A in about 2 minutes. We'll just finish off with one more question for our students. And we haven't talked about clubs and societies yet. Lizzie, you mentioned you sing in the choir. Is there anything else that anyone wants to add about what clubs and societies you do, what it's like being a Sydney student in social aspects? Katie, your hand went up very quickly.
Yes, I always love talking about this. So I'm really involved in theatre. I'm an obnoxious theatre kid, I will admit that. And Sydney is right next to the main student theatre, which is amazing because I'll be there till like 3 a.m. and it's very nice not have to kind of stumble back very far to get back to Sydney. There are loads of things that happen around college. I'm also involved in some charity societies, and we did there's informal singing as well as Sydney, which used to happen, and I think it's going to start again next year. So if you're not kind of like choral level singing but you want to still sing in a group, that's an option. So there's absolutely, like, anything you'll find interesting, there'll be stuff to do. But yeah, absolutely, theatre is cool.
Great. Jenny?
Yeah, I just thought it was worth adding, the benefit of the college system really is that you can play sport at a college level. And for someone like me who is really, really not good at sport, this is fantastic because you can actually join things that I never would have done for the university. So rowing is a good example. I did novice rowing in second year and I never would have done that for the university. And it was really chilled out, really fun, and a good way to get to know people from different years as well.
Brilliant. Rosie, anything to add? Then Tom, then Lizzie.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, sure. So as Jenny said, I'm also really not sporty, but I enjoyed playing lacrosse last year quite a lot just for college. It was a good way to kind of see other people and that sort of thing. And then within college, I've been quite involved with the Students' Union, the College Students' Union, and the History Society, which have both been kind of really good committee experiences. And then there's basically an opportunity to do whatever kind of floats your boat, try something new, anything like that. So I gave orchestra try, I've done photography for various things. So yeah, anything you could possibly want to do, there's an opportunity.
Sorry, I was going to say I think it's worth saying that there are also societies for the subjects. So Rosie, I think, mentioned the history one. We have Natural Sciences Society, which is the Wilson Society, which is kind of a student-led support network for your subject. So it's, if there's something that you don't want to go to your DOS about, or you don't feel like it's not something that you think is that important, but you just like to ask someone who's in the same boat as you, you have this network from the subject societies, and we would have had a barbecue, like garden parties and formal meals together. So it's kind of another network to, you know, to just as an extra layer of support, which is quite nice.
Brilliant. Tom, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think most of it's been said, but I think the fact that, you know, virtually all of these, well, I think all of them are student run, I think that takes away kind of the intimidation of going for these things, because it's all run by students, it's all other students who also might not have tried this before, and so I think it's just really nice that you can then also run clubs yourself. And if there isn't a society, if perhaps you wanted a society that isn't there, you can also then start up that society yourself when you arrive. And so I think, yeah, there's literally an option for literally everything.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks to our students. That brings us to the end of the student portion of this morning's sessions. So a massive thanks to Katie, to Shather, to Jenny, to Tom, to Rosie, to Lizzie for all of your insights and everything this morning. Thank you so much for answering everyone's questions so honestly and candidly. Feel free to leave. It looks like you guys have already answered the questions in the chat. If anyone knows whether or not you can play table tennis at Sydney, please feel free to type that into underneath Mac's question, because I can't answer that. But yes, we will move on to our directors of studies who are going to answer your questions for the next 45 minutes. So we'll do a quick introduction in a second. But yes, if you do have any questions about subjects, about studying, anything that you want to pose to our directors of studies, please do be entering them into the Q&A box and we will get to them. We'll do introductions alphabetically just to test how awake everyone is. So shall we start with Edward?
I didn't know which name you were going to do alphabetically there, so I was...
Oh, good point.
Hello, I'm Edward Wilson-Lee. I'm the DOS in English and also a tutor.
I think that must be me. Hello, everyone. I'm Hannah Saunders. I'm the DOS for Law at Sydney.
It makes it more confusing when everyone's faces are moving. Maria.
Sorry, my connection just, I think, flipped there. Sorry, it's a bit unstable today. So my name is Maria Noriega Sanchez. I'm Director of Studies for Modern and Medieval Languages, and I teach Spanish language mainly. Pleasure to be here.
And I'm Tom Lambert. I'm a Director of Studies in History. Yes, and it's a pleasure to be here too.
I think I'm the last one, right? So I'm Noga Ganani. I'm Director of Studies for Asian and Middle Eastern Studies. I study Chinese history and I also teach classical Chinese.
Brilliant, thank you all. So we had this question for the students and they gave some really interesting answers on it, but I have held it back because I think it would be a good place to start this discussion. So Raphael asked, how important is a Director of Studies? And is it important to have a Director of Studies whose subject interests overlap with your own? So shall we start with the first bit, like what is a DOS? What does a DOS do for the students? And then we can go on to that second bit. If anyone wants to get started, feel free to raise your hand or just unmute and go for it. Go for it, Anna.
I don't mind starting. So your Director of Studies is your first port of call for everything academic. So we arrange your supervisors that you meet with that teach you your subject throughout the year, but we also meet with you individually, usually twice a term, just to see how things are going, whether you've got any academic concerns or any questions, or if we can give you any advice that would help. So your Director of Studies would be quite a big part of your life at Sidney. And in terms of the second part of that question, I would probably say that it didn't matter so much, certainly for law. We tend to have wide-ranging sorts of specialist areas of expertise and interest, so it would be quite unlikely that you would be interested in the exact same thing as us, but because you study a wide range of subjects, you're likely to overlap with various different research areas at different points of your tripos here. So I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Thanks, Hannah. Anything to add from anyone else? Yeah, Maria.
Yeah, if I could just add to the last part Hannah was talking about, that especially applies to MML, I think, because you will be studying 2 languages in your degree, and then there's lots of language combinations. So your Director of Studies, you know, I'm Director of Studies for students doing French and German, for instance, and I'm in the Spanish section. So it's not that directly linked, but we help you a lot because we have an overview of how the degree works in different sections and the relationship between college and the faculty and the departments. And in our case, we also help you when you are planning your year abroad, for instance. So that's another, you know, important part of our job as Director of Studies. But yeah, just to add that in terms of MML.
Brilliant, thank you, Maria. Yeah, Noga.
There's maybe another thing to add, especially for us also at AIMS that have a year abroad, and there is some movement sometimes between programs. For instance, students who want to combine Chinese with Japanese and things of that sort. So your DOS will be the one who would be organizing that for you and making all the arrangements behind the scenes for the year abroad, for taking courses that are not usually taught in your subject, but you're still interested in, et cetera, et cetera. So anything academic, but even beyond that.
Brilliant, thank you. There's another question. Oh, sorry, Tom, were you looking to?
I don't have that much to add, actually. I mean, one thing in history is there are papers which all students do and are taught in college. So your Director of Studies, as well as being the sort of first port of call for any academic issues, is someone who you'll see quite a lot of through your first, second, and indeed actually third year with the new tripos as a sort of in a teaching relationship. So we do group teaching within college for throughout the year.
Yeah, very good point to clarify. The other question I held back is one about how students on smaller degrees get on, because I think this is a big anxiety that people applying to colleges, when you log on to a college website and see that, you know, certain degrees admit 2, 3, maybe even 1 person per year. Do you, as Directors of Studies, have any insights you can shed on this? How do students on your subjects get along, both with people studying the same degree, but also other degrees? Any thoughts on that? Go for it, Nick.
Well, AIMS is also quite a small subject too. We usually have a handful of students. And there is an advantage to that. Not only you get very, very personal attention, you get a lot of our time and our attention, but also you get to meet, well, you have your own little group and you're very tight at times within college. You have your cohort at the department, which is another world, but then you can also reach out beyond that. And sometimes if you're in a very big subject in a college, you don't tend to meet people from other subjects. So one of the nice things about being in a small subject is that you do get to socialize, not only with related fields like MML and history and English, but also with the sciences, with law, with medicine. So it's actually a good way to kind of reach out to other subjects as well.
Brilliant, thank you, Nathan. Tom, yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple of small subjects associated with history. We have history and politics, and history and modern languages is, we're going to have our first students this coming year, actually. And I mean, there's slightly special cases in that we sort of embrace them within the history community. And it is probably worth stressing that the History Society it's not just for historians, it's open to anyone with an interest in the past. So we have people doing Anglo-Saxon, Norse and Celtic. People from all sorts of subjects can sort of find a community there if they want to. And that I've always liked that aspect of what we do at Sydney.
I think that's one of the nice things about university in general. But I suppose the college system, even accentuates that, the small community aspect of it. Okay, let's get on to what I know everyone in the audience is really wanting to ask, and that's how does a candidate look competitive? What do you guys, when you're reading an application, like to see from an applicant? Like, what makes someone stand out, whether it be in a personal statement or anywhere else? So I don't know, again, who wants to start us off on that? Go for it, Hannah.
Oh, yeah. So I think showing some interest in the subject that you're applying to study for is absolutely crucial. And so then the next question is, well, how do I do that? How do I show an interest in something that I haven't studied? We're not expecting you to have started, researching, in my case, law independently, but think about perhaps things that are in the news that might be relevant. Think about, the implications of Brexit or the implications of COVID for the law and that sort of thing. So just have half a mind on it and be able through your personal application to show that you've got a real passion for it.
Thanks, Hannah. Any other subject insights then? Edward?
I usually like to suggest to people who ask this question that they try and demonstrate that they're both reading kind of broadly but also deeply. So I think, being ambitious, making sure you're not just reading the same thing. Obviously, it's great to have a grand passion, to have something you're really interested in, but you're going to be asked to study lots of different things. So showing that you're really open to reading widely and thinking about lots of different things is a good idea. But also, as I say, deeply. So, you don't want to come to interview and simply have to say, well, I read that and I liked it. Well, you need a little bit more than that, so thinking about what aspects of it you found confusing, what aspects of it you found enthralling, troubling, whatever. And dwelling with those a little bit so that you have something to talk about. And there's no, as I say, no right or wrong answer. There's not one thing you're supposed to say about the thing that you've read, but just that you've given it more thought than simply having read the book and decided whether or not you like it, and thinking more about how to articulate what insights it gave you and things like that.
That is essentially the only thing that I could say about history as well. I mean, I think it's probably important to stress that it's really hard to stand out in this context, and we don't expect you to stand out. It's not essential. But the applications that do tend to stand out are the ones with personal statements which do show some sort of reflection on the books and things that are listed as having been read. So it's not just a sort of I read this and found it interesting. It's I read this and I thought this aspect of it was particularly interesting for this reason. But these are quite small things, and it's quite a lot depends, as you will have been told, I think repeatedly, on grades and things like that as well. So I don't know, straight A stars also stand out.
Thanks, Tom. Maria, a question's actually come in about how would you demonstrate a passion for languages in a personal statement? Do you want to address that?
Yes, I mean, we do not see learning a language as a sort of isolated activity, but we see it kind of very much embedded in the culture, the history, of the countries where the language is spoken. So I think that because this degree gives you the chance to develop your language skills, but also to explore literature, philosophy, cinema, cultural outputs of many different areas, it would be really good if you start that exploration on your own. And, very simple things like watching films maybe in the foreign language, or reading the news, reading in translation if you're an ab initio student and you don't know the language yet, for example, will give us also a sense of this kind of broader intellectual curiosity that you have, and that Ed and Tom were mentioning now. And I think is a bit, you have to demonstrate what spark your interest and your motivation, but also what will sustain you through a languages degree, which is not simply learning grammar or vocabulary, but going much deeper into the subject. So, I would avoid things like saying language sounds nice, or the alphabet looks very cool, or I like the food. Kind of go a little bit deeper, if that helps.
Brilliant. Thank you, Maria. yeah, good stuff. Brilliant. So, I mean, we were talking a bit about personal statements and showing your interest and your passion, whatever it might be. But should we use that as a way to segue onto interviews? Because that's somewhere where those sorts of things might then come up again. So maybe, shall we say, what happens at a history interview, and should you factor that into the written work you're submitting and your personal statement, like those sorts of things? We start with history and go round some other subjects.
Okay, so for history, you get 2 interviews. One of them is focused on texts which you will not have seen or encountered before, and you're given them, I think, half an hour before the interview, and the idea is that you read them and then you discuss them with 2 historians. The other interview is focused primarily on your written work and your UCAS form. So we will choose one of the essays that you submit. I mean, you will choose one of the essays that you submit, and you will be asked questions about it. And then there will be the second half of the interview will focus on things that you've written in your personal statement. So we'll ask you about the books you've told us that you've read, or the ideas that you've thrown us in that statement. So that's what happens. So Stuart, what would you like me to reflect on at this point?
I think that, I mean, you don't need to reflect on anything else. I mean, don't put anything in your personal statement that you don't want to talk about, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you need to expect to be asked about the books that you've read. Sometimes I was talking to one of our third years, and he told me that he'd been forced to put into his personal statement something by one of his teachers, and they'd edited it for him, so he had to change this particular thing. And then that was the first thing he was asked about, and he declared a book that he'd read to be insufficiently conceptually developed or something. And so it was the question that he was asked was, "What do you mean by that?" And the way he responded to it was excellent. He said, "Well, actually, my teacher forced me to change that, to put that in," and that just meant we could go on with the interview with the thick stuff that he had actually meant. But it's good to you need to, when you are writing a personal statement, you need to be sort of able to sort of talk about it honestly. But that's essentially all there is to it, I think.
Brilliant, thank you, Tom. Does anyone have anything else to add about their interviews? Maria?
Sorry, yeah, it's a bit, just to mention that for modern languages, because you are studying 2 languages, you will have 2 interviews, one for each language. So you can either do both post-A level, or you can do one post-A level and one ab initio. And if for the interview for your post-A level language or languages, you will get a passage in the foreign language that you have to prepare for 15 minutes. And then the first half of the interview, about 10 minutes, we'll talk in the foreign language about that passage. We ask you about the main ideas, just discuss the issues. And please, we are not expecting kind of native speaker proficiency or anything like that. We are very aware of your stage in the learning process and where you're at in your language ability. So it's just a matter for us to assess your language accuracy, your vocabulary. So we need that as part of our assessment. And then the rest of the interview we switch to English to speak about your personal statement, like Tom was explaining. For the if you are applying for an ab initio language, then we will give you a passage in English and we'll be talking in English about that. So we are not expecting you to know any of the language yet. Okay, so no panics there. And we also do some a written test. where again you will have to write in your chosen post-A-level language. There are lots of examples of this kind of text in the faculty and applications website, and I encourage you to look at this, because they give you examples from previous years of the passages used, and also advice on how to approach it and how to answer the questions. So I think it's worth, you know, having a very good look and practicing on your own for preparation for the interview. I think that's mostly it for MML.
Brilliant, thank you, Maria. Yeah, Nuga.
Maybe on that note, I should also say a few words about how it goes with AIMS, because we do deal mostly with languages and cultures as well. So for all the languages that we offer, we don't expect any prior background. You can come completely without any background whatsoever. But if you do have some background in the target language, we would probably show you a passage or a few passages in different levels and just see how it goes. It's not a test, it's just a way for us to see where you stand in comparison to the program. But it also reflects in a way on your interest. And on that note, if you state that you're interested in China, we might ask you for various questions, things that you've read, but also if you follow the news and current events and things of that sort. So we want to see interest, but also, as was said before, curiosity and looking beyond just the headlines for a deeper kind of involvement with the target country and the language. And we very much look for dedication, because these are so different. These are very difficult languages to study. Interest is not enough. Of course, we do look for motivation and the capacity to really dedicate yourself to the course, which is very intensive. Not to scare you, but just to let you know that if you are interested, you should really show us that you're passionate about it and you can really follow it through, because these are very challenging languages.
Thank you. Yeah, Hannah.
Just to reiterate what several other people have said, that for law, we wouldn't expect any prior knowledge of the law. You would have 2 interviews usually, and usually for both you would be given some kind of text to look at, sort of perhaps 15 minutes or so in advance, and then we would be talking to you about the text, but not in a way that required you to have any kind of legal knowledge whatsoever. It's more about the way you communicate and your ability to analyze the text and to think around questions and that sort of thing. You'd also have something called the Cambridge Law Test, which you come in and you do a particular essay, but again, there's no prior knowledge needed about the law. It's more about the way that you write and the way that you think, and your ability to see implications of different issues.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, Tom, yeah, there's a follow-up questions come about how they're structured.
I spotted that, and I've also remembered something I should have said earlier, which is that a common misconception with interviews about essays with history is that you need to defend what you've written in your essay, that it's a sort of attack and defense exercise, and that's not how it works, and it's best and I think it's probably quite an important thing to stress. The idea, it often is the case that the essay that's been submitted for the interview is one that's been written several months before the interview itself. It's often the case that the people who've submitted those essays have changed their minds about what they argued there between writing them and coming to the interview. And if that's the case, just be open about it. There's absolutely no need to sort of defend to the death every word that you have written. And indeed, part of the point of that aspect of the interview is to see how you handle new information or new ideas, and whether you're able to work with those productively. Are all history interviews structured the same at all colleges? Mostly, I think they're very similar in that there tends to be that structure of one focusing on essays and UCAS forms, and one which is focused on unseen texts. But I wouldn't want to say that was the same everywhere. I think colleges have a lot of liberty to change how they do their own things. So I know Stuart might be able to answer that question a bit better.
I think that's the party line, that they're similar at most places, but colleges set their own sort of standards. Yeah. Brilliant. Okay, thanks everyone. A question has come in about GCSEs, and I'm happy to give the admissions line on that. But does anyone? So the question is, how do you judge students who have average GCSEs but excellent A levels alongside the other parts of their application? Does anyone want to speak to that, or are you happy for me to just give the? Yeah. Okay. I mean, from an admissions point of view, I think it's fair to say that no course at Cambridge has any requirements for GCSEs. There are no minimum standards for GCSE entry. We use GCSEs as a performance indicator more than anything to see that students are on a upward trajectory or anything like that. We understand that people when they're 16 often are not at their peak, and you can certainly go onwards and upwards when you start your post-16 education. So don't worry too much about your GCSE scores. They can be excellent or they can be average. That will not necessarily affect your application. Does anyone want to challenge or underscore anything on that? No? Cool. Okay. Brilliant. Okay. Well, Mac has asked how they should choose the written work to submit, which is a tricky one, I think, because we just tell people to submit a piece of written work. Does anyone have any advice? Length, type, whether it's something you love, whether it's something you got your best mark on, anything? Any advice?
I mean, for us, it should be something you're happy to talk about more than anything else. Something that you would feel comfortable having a conversation about. We don't use the written work to sort of judge whether you get to come for interview, or really it's sort of, we don't really grade it as part of the decision-making process. We use it primarily as a sort of starting point for a conversation, and I think you should probably bear that in mind when choosing which piece to submit. It's best to have something that is as close to sort of history as possible. We sometimes find with applicants from overseas that they don't have history essays of the sort that we're used to getting from English and UK schools. But if it's about the past, we're happy with it. Basically, we can work with anything.
Brilliant. Any more on that? Or is that yeah, Edward?
Yeah, so we don't tend to talk about the essays in the interview, and I suppose for English, although this may be more broadly true, something that people may not think about is the style in which it's written. To a certain extent, what we're looking for is the style in which it's written, in which I don't mean it has to be kind of flowery and gorgeously written, but that a lot of it has not to do just so much with what you're saying as to the way in which you're making connections between ideas. So, something that you feel that you've written where you feel that the structure of the argument, that you've moved from one thing to another in a kind of persuasive way, because that helps us to see how you fit ideas together and move from evidence to argumentation, evidence to analysis to argumentation, and things like that. That's a kind of central part of it. So it's not so much a point of view that you feel strongly, you have a strong conviction about. In fact, you may well be show your most impressive argumentation on things about which you have no strong conviction whatsoever, but really something on which you're confident that you have the thinking is fluid and well structured, because that's a lot of what I look for in the written work.
Yeah. A follow-up question came in about whether it has to be part of an A level, or could it be something for like an essay competition or perhaps an EPQ or something like that. In the past, I know it was advised that we wanted something with Marcus comments on, but I don't know if that is still the case. Just nod, yeah. Or Edward, yeah.
Sorry, yeah, I think just to clarify why, I think it has to, I think, in most subjects be something that you have submitted to your teacher, because that's the only way that we can use the school as a guarantee that this is something that you actually wrote independently. If an essay competition may have been something that someone had some help on or something, and the essay competition wouldn't necessarily know that, whereas if you've submitted it to your teacher presumably will know your work well enough to know that it is your work. So the marks on it give us that guarantee. You're muted.
I'm muted, yeah. My Zoom just told me that. Thank you. So what was next? Oh yeah, a follow-up question on interviews actually. If you want to study history and modern languages, do you do 2 interviews, 1 for each subject? Yeah. Cool.
Yes, and if I may just add that you can study the language level, or you can also study the language ab initio from scratch. With the only exception of French. French is always post level. And then yes, you will have an interview for MML, an interview for history, and also the other at interview assessment as well. For history and modern languages, the written test, if you are an ab initio student, is slightly different. You will have, again, you have examples in the website, but we do a little aptitude language test as well with an invented language. It's quite a nice exercise. So you have to, just to see how you think, how you relate and how you would acquire a language. And that's the difference. If it's just the post-A level, then it will be exactly the same as the written assessment that an MML student does for HML. Okay, I don't know if Tom, if you want to add anything for history.
So the history interview that you will get if you're doing an HML application would be the one focused on your essay and your UCAS form. It wouldn't be the one where you get a separate text. So, but in every other respect, it would be identical to the one you got from the if you were a straight historian. That's not quite the right way of putting it, but yes, that's what I mean.
Thank you, Tom. Splendid. So a very common anxiety and a question we get quite a lot is, Cambridge degrees are very intensive undertakings. So what kind of support do students on your respective degree courses at Sydney get? Can we talk a bit about what support services are in place, or maybe how the tutor and DOS system works to help students through? Does anyone in particular want to get us started on that? Yeah, go for it, Noga.
Just to further clarify the question a bit, is this mostly in terms of academic performance or personal well-being, or both?
I mean, we can speak to both, but if you're more comfortable just talking about one of those, that's fine.
So maybe just in a few words, when my experience from AIMS is that, so not only you have the DOS in college and you have a tutor in college, but at the department too, that's another set of support, both social and academic. So in each language program, you will also have people that you can go to for problem solving or for advice, as well as your DOS, which would be me, and your tutor in college. But because the way the language program is set up, you have actually a few layers of support. You have the specific language program, you have the department, you have the faculty. It's kind of like a bubble, layers of bubbles of support, if that makes sense.
Hannah, was that Hannah?
Yeah, just to add to that, I absolutely agree with what Noga said. But also, I think this comes back to one of the questions we had earlier, that because Sydney is not a huge college, in some ways, I think the students get quite a lot of support from being at a smaller college where they know people in all years and across different subjects. And that both in terms of well-being and academics, if there's something they're worried about, they can go and speak to somebody who did this course the year before or the year before that. And get some advice. So I think that is a source of support as well.
Yes, Edward. Thank you, Hannah.
I think it's also worth saying that whilst Cambridge courses do tend to be extremely demanding, that it's something that should be taken to mean you get out of them, you get the most out of them if you're, committed and doing a lot of work for it. It doesn't mean that, every week you're being subjected to some kind of grilling or something like that. In fact, one of the beauties of the tutorial system is you're there, you're supposed to make mistakes. In fact, mistakes are the most important thing. What you do is you go to the supervision in order to have feedback and have someone who has a lot of experience on this help you to see your blind spots, help you to see where you're not quite understanding and to push it forward. And so thinking of it in terms of it is, yes, absolutely intellectually demanding, but I think thinking of it in terms of being constantly having to be right about everything is the wrong way to think about it being demanding. And in fact, one of the good things about the system is the constant kind of focus on analyzing your own patterns of thought as opposed to producing a perfect piece of work. And it, later on we can come to the summative assessments where we see how well you're doing about that. But a lot of the time the focus is more on just developing your own ways of thinking and not on producing something perfect.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. Yeah. So I mean, we've got about 9 minutes left, and I think a good place to go now would be, again, another very common anxiety. Why should I study the humanities? I say this as someone with 3 history degrees, but where do students from your degrees end up? Like what's the purpose of coming and studying your particular subjects? Okay, it's a horrible question, but does anyone want to get started on it? No go?
I'll speak mostly on the Chinese and Japanese side of our program because these I know best since I arrived at Cambridge, and I think it's a pretty straightforward question on our end in terms of what I'm not going to answer the why study humanities because I think it's way beyond the scope of this conversation. But I do feel very strongly about this. So if any of you are interested, I'll be happy to talk about that too. But in terms of career, of where our students end up, so we have quite a lot of trajectories coming out of our program. Of course, there is the academic one, but they're the minority, those who go on to do graduate studies and PhDs. But most of our students go to various aspects of either finance, banking, management, diplomacy. Quite a lot go to diplomacy, working for the UN, for embassies, and various aspects of the business world. So in terms of studying our language, especially Chinese and Japanese, there are various applications really across the landscape of future careers. But they vary very much. And already during the program, especially during the year abroad, you can start charting out different types of trajectories for your career. And there's a lot of support on that end if you're interested. So that's from our perspective.
Edward, was that a hand?
Yeah, I think so. For English, as you'd expect, lots of people go on to become academics or journalists or writers or go on to do lots of things. But I think actually one thing worth saying, and I think in some ways the system is quite stressful in making you choose at such an early age the subject that you're doing, but that actually I think the people probably go on to broadly similar things from all the subjects. And it's worth remembering that what you're being taught in all of the subjects is a fairly similar skill, which is how to absorb a vast amount of information, digest it, and give it back to people in a form that shows that you've understood the key things about it. And that is something that you do if you're reading novels, or if you're reading historical texts, or if you're reading law digests, or whatever. And that's a skill that's broadly applicable to whatever job that you're going out there to do. And in fact, the idea that you would at university learn vocationally the skill that you're going to go off and do, as opposed to simply learn the skills that will allow you to do whatever job you choose, I think is a misconception. So I think many of the courses will give you broadly the same skills with some additional things. Obviously you don't learn Chinese if you come to do English, but a lot of the skills will be quite shared across the subjects.
Yeah, Hannah.
For law, we obviously have quite a strong direction headed towards law as a career as well. So a lot of our graduates go on and become solicitors, some go on and become barristers. We do have some people who do law not because they want to become a lawyer, but because they're interested in the subject. And of course, it's a great foundation for anything in terms of business or academia. But yes, the vast majority are looking for a career in the law. So we have a very strong record, and a lot of our students leave us already with a training contract or a pupillage in place.
In this year, actually, most of our historians seem to have gone off to do law too, but that's not representative of normal things. I mean, normally we do get some going off into law, but we get business, finance, civil service, teachers. Not last year, I think there were a couple of teachers. There's my favorite is a student who got her first in history and then went off to the Jacques Lecoq School of Clowning in Paris, where she did courses on things like buffoonery, which I thought was a particularly good way to use an Oxbridge degree. But yes, it's what, as Edward says, the destinations are, from most humanities subjects, I think are fairly interchangeable.
Brilliant. I think a degree in buffoonery is necessary to be a historian, to be fair. In many ways. Anyway, brilliant. Well, does anyone have any final thoughts on that, or shall we round this up? Great. Okay, good. So I suppose we've got enough time for a last sort of single question, which would be, I suppose, why should a student come to Sydney to study your subject? This is an open day. We are trying to get people to come and study here. So if you could sell the college studying at Sydney, how would you do it? What would you sort of point to as a benefit of going to Sidney Sussex? Tom?
I mean, I would stress the sort of deep commitment of Sydney to history. We've got a lot of history fellows here. We've got a very sort of well-embedded student history society. As a history community, we probably, I mean, there are other colleges which also have very strong history communities, but we've got to be sort of one of the most sort of institutionalized sub colleges for this subject. And we'd love to have you. You'll be very welcome if you come to Sydney, and we hope you'll have a lovely time.
Brilliant. Anna?
So for law, I would say you should come to Sydney for law because it's an incredibly friendly and supportive place to study law. We have a very active student law society, and every year we run a college moot which all the students take part in. It's a real event, but it's also low pressure. If you've never done a moot before, doing it with all your friends and with your director of studies is a really nice introduction, so that you can then, once you've found your confidence, go on and hopefully do lots more moots elsewhere, but friendly and supportive.
Yeah, Edward.
I think specifically for English, you should come because Sydney is a place to be unfussily excellent. But more generally for Sydney, I always think the best thing about Sydney is it sits like habitable planets in the Goldilocks zone. So it's not so old as to be stuck in its ways, but not so new as to not, kind of lack the Cambridge experience. It's not so big as to that you'll get lost in it, but it's not so small to lack the to lack all of the resources and the societies and so on and so forth. So I think it's perfectly in the middle. It's the perfectly Goldilocks zoned Cambridge College.
Brilliant. Thank you all. That's the first time I've asked that question without anyone mentioning Sainsbury's. So well done. Brilliant. Well, that does bring us to the end of the hour. So we can wrap it up there. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming along and giving such wonderfully reflective answers to everything. Yes, so you are all welcome to sign off. You can wave, unmute, whatever you would like to do. And we will move on to the next portion of the session. Thank you all. So we are about to start the interviews. What am I trying to say? The interview question portion of today's session. We will give it another 60 seconds before we start because we are waiting for a few more people to arrive and I need to go and fill up a water bottle. So I'm going to go for, very briefly, I'm going to disappear and come back. So yes, if anyone comes in and is confused, Rupert or Wayne, please feel free to tell them what's happening. We'll be back very shortly.
Oh, we have a picture of bicycles. So I guess they're not going to, I mean, presumably they had this PowerPoint. Are they going to go through it? Yeah, I guess they're going to go through it, the other bits, not our bits first. They're going to go through the other bits first, I assume.
Okay, sorry about that. Oh, is my camera going to turn on? Maybe, maybe not. Hopefully is my computer frozen? Or can people hear me?
We hear you, and now your camera might be just coming back, okay. But cool. You're a black box right now.
Okay, well, you know, worst comes to worst, I'll be a blob for the next 60 minutes. So yes, thank you everyone for coming along to this. This session is all about interview questions. We are going to be going through a range of interview questions in the next 60 seconds. Oh God, Zoom has frozen. This isn't good.
We can still hear you, but we can't see you.
Okay, this is peculiar. That's fine. So we're joined by a range of our academics here at Sidney Sussex, who are going to be walking us through some practice interview questions that they've brought along. I'll be sharing my screen. Hey there. I'll be sharing my screen so we can see their questions, and I'll be doing a quick introduction on what interviews are in a second. But before we go to that, we'll do a quick round of introductions. Shall we go alphabetically by first name? So Andrew, Charles, onwards.
Hello, yes, I'm Andrew Keynes, and I work in the computer laboratory at Cambridge, and I'm the Director of Studies for Linguistics at Sydney.
Charles.
Hi, I'm Charles Roddy. I'm the Director of Studies in Economics at Sydney. I work, I'm part of a team of 4 of us, and I work on microeconomics.
Hello, I'm Harriet. I'm Director of Studies in Biological Natural Sciences at Sidney Sussex. Sussex is part of a team, and I work on viruses as my research area.
And I'm Rupert Stash. I'm a social anthropologist. And so I'm within the subject of human, social, and political sciences, or HSPS. And so the 3 departments and disciplines that are amalgamated in that subject, besides my own, are also sociology and politics.
Brilliant. And Wayne.
Unmute, sorry, I forgot to unmute. I'm Wayne Boucher, Director of Studies in Mathematics. I started out in life as a theoretical physicist, but I currently work in structural biology.
Brilliant. Thanks, Wayne. Thanks, everyone. So, as I say, we're going to do a really quick introduction to what interviews are, and then we're going to go through some questions. If at any point those of you in the audience do have specific subject questions for our panelists, feel free to use the Q&A box and pop them in there, and we will cover them as we go through. So, to our academics, just keep an eye on the Q&A box in case something specific comes up. I'm going to start sharing the screen. And of course, that's not working. Why can't I see my screen? Oh no. Right, well, this might scupper things slightly. Does anyone have the PowerPoint that Catherine circulated up on their computer, and can they share their screen? Because Zoom isn't letting me share.
Host has disabled screen sharing.
Oh, I'll just make you a co-host, Wayne. It's my power trip. I can't let anyone else have these responsibilities. This will slightly change the order of things. So this means that I'm going to come up earlier in the session. Yeah, I don't know why I can't share, which is very annoying.
Stuart, if I try to share a screen, I still get that host has disabled. I don't know if Wayne is able to yet.
I'll just make
I'm trying to find I have PowerPoint open, but I can't. I have too many windows.
Okay,
open.
I think I've got it here.
Zoom's long list.
Thank you, Rupert.
Ah, you found it?
Yeah, let me just put it in.
Okay, good.
Brilliant.
Just a minute, I'll get that into slideshow in a second. Okay.
So yes, I will continue talking while we get this into the slideshow. So the reason that we're running this session is because there is a lot of anxiety often around the interviews. When we do these sessions live at the open days, we'll tend to pick on the audience members, get them to offer their thoughts on the questions we've brought, but we're just going to talk through them today. And the whole idea is to let you see what happens during an interview, what sort of questions, what kind of sorts of topics, what kind of themes you might encounter when it comes to interview. And the reason for this is because, as I say, there's often quite a lot of anxiety around the interviews. They are highly mythologized as parts of the admissions process. And it is worth remembering that the admissions process takes in a large amount of information on all of our candidates. Your interview is just one part of this. So while the interviews are important, they're very well known, they are talked about a lot, they are no more or less important than other aspects of your application. So it shouldn't be too much of an anxiety. Brilliant, thank you. You've picked the right slide. So yeah, these are the other sorts of information that we obviously look at when we consider your application. Things like your GCSE scores and your A-level scores, but also information that we gather from your teachers. People like your teachers obviously know you really well. We only ever see you for a few months of a year. Your teachers see you for much longer than that. So we listen to what your teachers say in your teacher reference. Similarly, we like to get an idea of who you are through your personal statements. And for some of the subjects represented here today, your personal statement might come up during your interview. So there's lots of things like that to consider as well. Rupert, can we skip forward a couple of slides? That'd be great. Yeah, one more. Oh, brilliant. In terms of format, again, this is going to become more clear as we go through the questions, but typically they last between sort of 20 minutes and half an hour. Some of them can go a bit longer, and any of the academics here can correct anything I'm saying when they get to their question and talk a bit about their subject specific details of their interviews. But yeah, similarly, typically you'll be presented with information that you may have encountered before, but in some subjects there'll be things that you won't have encountered before, and often we are trying to see how you react to situations, how you react to new information or familiar information, and use that within a learning environment like an interview. They are ways to assess your aptitude for various things, and also your interest in the subject that you are applying for. We want to know that you are someone that is genuinely interested in this subject and that will both enjoy and thrive at a degree level. So that's the whole idea of the format. We will expand on this a bit as we go through. So shall we actually get to the questions, because there are a lot to get through and it's already 10 past. So yeah, Harriet, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So this is one of the questions that I have used in the past to assess applicants who've applied for biological natural sciences. So when you apply for natural sciences, you indicate whether you're interested in the kind of biological modules or the physical modules. And if you're interested in the biological ones or a mixture, then you'll be interviewed and have a biological style interview, which will be about 25 minutes, and it will be 2 interviewers, and we'll ask you kind of a broad range of questions. As Stuart alluded to, I might well ask you something focusing on your personal statement. So if you said you're interested in something, do be prepared that might happen. But the question I've chosen to consider today is I might show you a picture, and the kind of broad thing I'm asking you is, what are we looking at? Now, feel free to whack some answers in the chat box if you're feeling brave, but if you're not, that's fine. So, and the people's reactions to this at interview will really vary depending on what their experience has been, particularly in the last couple of years with so much disruption. But the sorts of answers I might be getting might be what we're actually looking at, which you may or may not have identified as the inside of a cell. And some candidates may have come across the type of microscope that was used to create this image, and that will just depend on what you've come across in your learning, or indeed reading around outside. So this is a picture of a cell that has been made with an electron microscope. So this is called a transmission electron micrograph. I wouldn't necessarily expect you to know that. But what I'd be thinking about then is trying to guide the candidate through thinking about what sort of thing we might see in a cell. And so in the bottom left-hand corner, we have a kind of big thing, and then you can see lots of smaller things. And so I want the candidates to think about, what do I know that's in a cell? What might be in this picture? And so we're thinking it may be that often people identify things wrongly, and it's just chatting through and thinking about why that might not be the case. And once we've identified things, so in the bottom right-hand corner of this image is the nucleus, and then we've got the kind of stripy, wiggly lines are endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi, and then all the circles are a variety of things, but there are lots of mitochondria there. And so one thing I might get onto, depending on the timing, is why a cell might have mitochondria. What are they for? Why might they have loads of them? So thinking about what different cell, because you're often taught about a cell, but obviously cells are different and they do different things. So why might a cell need lots of mitochondria? And then if we get through all that, which can obviously take quite a bit of time, we might start to think about how this image was made. And so one thing that people often see in textbooks is a very classic drawing of a mitochondrion that looks kind of like a long oval, 3D oval. And I might start to get candidates to think why, if you're taking a picture of something, why an oval might appear differently. So thinking about when we look at things using biological techniques, why we might have to think about the method we used to look at them to understand the output. In this case, we're taking a slice through a cell, and in that case, you might be taking that slice at different angles through these 3D shapes in a cell, and as such, they might not look quite like the pictures you see in textbooks. So those are the sorts of things that we might think around, but if it might go off on different directions depending on what the candidate is interested in. So that's a very brief overview of what that sort of question might look like.
Wonderful, thank you, Harriet. Next, oh God, it's me next. So in sort of, well, not actually stark contrast to Harriet's example there. So I interview in history, and something you might do as a history interview would be quite similar in many ways, is looking at an image, you'll be presented with a source. So typically the history interviews follow the format where you'll have two interviews. One of those interviews, you'll be presented with an unseen source, so a source that you haven't seen before, maybe a piece of reading, maybe an image like this, maybe an object, and you'll be talking about that source to a pair of academics. In your second interview, typically you'll be talking about information from a UCAS form or your pre-submitted written work. So that will form the basis of your second interview. Certainly that's the format at Sydney and the majority of the colleges for history interviews. But for your first interview, or for one of your interviews, you will be doing something like this, looking at a source. So I would often pick a source a bit like this, where you have an image, often with a close-up, maybe with some information about that image, and I would just start off by saying, what are we looking at here? And hopefully the student will not be familiar with the source. The idea of always trying to find a source that students will not know is that we don't want to sort of privilege any student that has studied a particular module or something at A level that other people won't have done. So we look for something a bit obscure. So we'll give them something like this. So what is this? And what can we say about it? And there'll be a whole range of responses. It could be almost anything. Typically, the student normally would start off by describing the image itself, what is happening in there. So you might point out we're seeing some kind of altercation, something involving knights or soldiers of some description and some churchmen. There is evidence of some religious things going on alongside the violence. And then, we would go on and say, well, what kind of source do we think this might be? What kind of content is this? So is this in a written manuscript? Is this in a printed book? Trying to get to the depths of what this is. And after that, we might start talking about, something like the intention of the source, all the while trying to get to this idea of actually, what is this? And someone might recognize it. Occasionally you will have someone say, oh, that's clearly the murder of Thomas Becket. You're like, oh, okay, well done. That's fantastic. And if someone does say that, then we would obviously have to change tacks and find a different range of form of questioning. Like, oh, what do we know about Thomas Becket then? So what more can we say about this source? When do you think it was? Is it contemporary to Becket? So we try to pin down when this source is from, because I haven't given you the date. I've given you some clues to it, but not much. It's a printed source, so we know it's sometime in the later medieval period at the very earliest, or later than that. So not contemporary with Becket, and we go on from that. But again, we're always just waiting to see what the student picks out, and it might be something that we haven't necessarily seen before or be expecting. So they might pick out that this image has clearly been tampered with. Someone has drawn all over this, both on the image you can see scrawl marks, but also on that text on the left-hand side. There's ink and things scrawled onto it. So we might explore that. Why has someone done this? And that would take us down a different path. How this text has been used, how this image has been interpreted and used further on in its lifetime. So there are lots of things like that that might come up in discussions. No two interviews would be the same. You would probably go down lots of different alleyways with different students, depending what they might have picked out. You might end up talking more about the devotional things on some things. You might talk about why Becket's got a piece of a sword sticking out of his head on the image. Talk about the gore, like why has the artist decided to present the scene in this particular way. Talk about how the figures have been interpreted there. So there's all sorts of things, and it would go on for maybe the first 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, however much of the interview the conversation goes on for. There is no right or wrong way to interpret this image, is what I'm trying to get to. It's all about how you respond to it and what you pick out, and we will then go from that. So that tends to be the format, whether it's a written source or a visual source, really. We're always waiting to see what the student picks out and how they apply that to the questions we follow up with. So I think that's enough on Caxton's depiction of Becket. We can go on, but yeah. I think this is Andrew. Yeah.
Thank you, Stuart. Okay, so yes, here is an example of the kind of exercise you might be challenged with during an interview. There are many other different challenges we might set, but in this one, you're being shown a language which we assume you haven't seen before, and you're given a set of examples in English and a set of examples in that language. This happens to be a variety of Swahili spoken in the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, but it could be anything, and it could even be a made-up language. The point is actually that we expect that you're unfamiliar with it. And what we might ask you to do is then fill in a gap. So in this one, I'm just going to work through towards number 11. So trying to work out the Swahili version of she saw them. And what we're really interested in actually is not trying to trick you or time you, but instead get an insight into your thought processes as you analyze and as you work through this puzzle, as you work through this problem. So actually we encourage you to think out loud and tell us what you're discovering as you go. So maybe, obviously that's not something you might do every day. So maybe if you're going to apply for linguistics, you might want to practice this kind of thing. You can find these kinds of puzzles on Linguistics Olympiad websites. So they are freely available. So here in this example, I'll just quickly work through one example and just tell you what I'm thinking. I've had the advantage of having looked at this before, obviously. But firstly, in the first 4 sentences, we get a look at how you differentiate the person being described. So here we've got Nina Sema, Wuna Sema, Anna Sema, Wana Sema. So you quickly see that what isn't changing is sema. And so we see that actually here we've got speak, the verb speak is represented by sema. And what's changing is the first part of the word. So nina, wuna, ana, wana. And these are obviously representing I, you, she, they. And you quickly start to notice differences from English. So it's not, you know, these words aren't separated with space like we might expect in English. The form of the verb doesn't change. So speak and speaks look the same in the Swahili version. Okay. Then sentence 5 and 6, they start to unpick a little bit more. They reveal a bit more. So now we've got a different verb. We've got si, which here is obviously ona. If you look at the difference from nina sema, nina ona. And also we see how past tense is expressed. So here we've got nina ona and nili ona. So actually maybe we realize that na and li are marking time, whereas before we might not have noticed that looking at sentences 1 to 4. Okay, and then in sentence 7, we see that how you can express an object. So we've got nina, which we've already encountered, and we've got ona, but in between we've got wa, which we realize means them as an object. So I see them. And again, we see that word order is different. So we kind of have to drop our expectations based on what we might be used to in English. And with those first 7, actually, you're able to put together 11. So she saw them would be a. So we realize that she is expressed by a. The past tense is represented by li. So it's a, li. Next, we need to put in them. So that's wa, as we just saw. And then the verb see is ona. And ona doesn't change whether it's past or present. So it's a, li, wa, ona. And obviously, if you're flying, then you would have time to do 12 and 13. But we would just want to see how you work out 11. There could be other challenges as well. Just as a general point about linguistics, what we're really interested in is how you analyze language, how you approach problems and making comparisons across languages. So really try and think about your own linguistic experience, because we know that you haven't been taught linguistics in school, probably. So when you come to interview, we want to see that you've sort of thought about linguistic problems that you've experienced. So we don't really have strong expectations about, you know, your prior knowledge, but just we want to see that you've got that passion for looking at language puzzles and language problems. That's it from me.
Right. Maths, it's a good subject. So we do typically 2 interviews, about 25 minutes each, and all we do is ask you math questions. So hopefully that's what you would expect. And this question here, I've never asked an interview, but I know other people have. It's sort of a warm-up question. It's just in case you're a bit nervous, you want to make sure you're settled. Now, maths is a bit tricky because you can't really talk through it. You actually have to do it. So what I'm going to do here and see if it works, I'm going to share my screen, show you roughly how you might think about this question. Whoops, let me see if I can bring up a whiteboard. Somewhere there should be a whiteboard. Oh boy, isn't there a whiteboard for sharing? Somewhere. Ah, there it is, okay. So let me just write down the equation. Unfortunately, I'm writing with a mouse, so that's one of the things that's going to be tricky with the interviews this year. Last year we did it online, and the way I understand it, this year they're also going to be online. And I'm writing with a mouse, and that's not ideal. Let's put it that way. So hopefully, when you are able to do the interview, you can do a tablet with a pen or pencil or something. So that's the equation we're looking at now. You're probably used to solving polynomial equations, or at least quadratic equations, but you may not have seen something like this because e to the x is not a polynomial, of course. So it's a bit trickier to think about. So we usually let the student just think about it, and if they haven't said anything for a minute or 2, then we'll start to talk, but otherwise we let them just talk their way through the problem. And one thing that a lot of them would do, and I guess this is a pretty typical thing to do, is maybe draw a picture of what some of these things look like. So e to the x, for example, you could expect to draw that. Sorry, like I said, this is with my mouse, so the drawing is not going to be perfect. So that's one, x and y. So you could draw y equals e to the x, and then you could draw a kx. But the problem is k can be anything. It's any real number. Any real number. So it's hard to draw that without thinking of a specific real number. But a typical, that's supposed to say real. A typical line might look like this, for example. And the question is, so how many solutions are there? Well, the picture I drew looks like there's probably at least one solution. But is that true for all k? And is there more than one solution? So we'll let you think about that. If you think about various k's, the k I've drawn is a positive k, but you could think about a negative k, which looks something like that. Or you could even think of a 0k, which would just be the axis. And it's not a super difficult question, but there's the thing is you have to think about it carefully. And there's also some border effects. So one of the issues in computer science, because I do a lot of programming, is to get your boundary conditions right. And that's an issue here. So it turns out that there is one special case, which is when this line just is the tangent to the curve. And you get exactly one solution because of that slightly odd situation. So we'd want you to discover that odd situation and figure out for which values of k that actually holds. And of course, the thing that you can do to solve that is, well, this has to be true, but also the derivative at this point of e to the x has to be the same as the slope of this line. And the slope of that line is k. So the derivative of function e to the x better be k at that point. So that's the kind of thing we'd expect you to do. So like I say, we haven't asked this question specifically, but we've asked other curve questions, curve sketching and curve doing. And if you get through that quickly, we might also ask you to, well, instead of you've sketched here y equals, or I've sketched y equals e to the x, we might turn it around and say, why don't you sketch x equals e to the y and see how people cope with that? As people are used to sketching curves where it's y equals something, but they're not necessarily so familiar with drawing x equals something. Of course, you can just flip x and y and think of it that way, but there's other ways to do it as well. So yeah, that's a typical kind of thing that we might ask. All right, I think that's all. Should I stop the sharing? All right, so can we go back to PowerPoint? Do you want me to do that or?
Brilliant, thank you.
I've got it.
You got it? Okay.
Yeah. So as I mentioned at the beginning, my subject at the University of Cambridge is called Human, Social, and Political Sciences, or HSPS, and it's an amalgam of 3 disciplines and departments: sociology, politics, and social anthropology. And so students who are admitted to study this subject at the university initially study all 3 of those disciplines, and then in their final years, they specialize in 1 or 2 of those 3 that they end up gravitating towards. None of these disciplines is actually understood very well in public life outside of universities, and the ideas of these disciplines aren't really taught in schools earlier than university level. As interviewers, we may meet students who have studied one of these subjects in school or read independently in the subject, but students generally won't have studied the subject really at all in the way that it's taught at university level. Therefore, even less than in fields perhaps like maths, in HSPS interviewing, we're not testing the knowledge you have, or that's not our big focus. We're not testing the preparation you have in the sense of existing foundations of training in the field, but rather we're trying to learn about how you think on your feet, how you communicate, how you engage with other people's thought, in this case about social life and social processes. So therefore, in the case of the example question shown here and most other questions we'd ask, we're not looking for the right answer. There isn't one right answer. We're also not looking for an argument or an opinion for the sake of making an argument or having an opinion. We're not necessarily looking for how much you've read or how knowledgeable you are, though that can be valuable. So what we are looking for is something all my colleagues so far have also emphasized, which is your ability to open a question up, reason clearly and insightfully about an issue, and just explore that issue by making distinctions, forming helpful concepts, connecting distinctions and concepts to real world examples, and that's a message I think you're getting from the panel at large. We're interested in glimpsing how you reason, and my subject tracks very similar to what Andrew was describing for linguistics in terms of trying to see how you think on your feet, and what Stuart was saying for history, for example. So the question shown here then can be taken in a lot of different directions. This question is basically an ink blot. And my strongest advice to students, both in this context and in later phases of your university studies, is take the question in any direction that you have intuitions about. Take risks. If you've got a little inkling of an insight or curiosity or confusion about some aspect of a question and what it makes you think, pick that up and run with it, because your creative connection making in relation to the terms of a question is probably going to be the most revealing, interesting fuel for an actual conversation and an actual learning process. So let me wrap up then by just gesturing very briefly. Did I lose my screen share? Sorry.
Yeah, I think I'm sharing it.
Oh, okay, well, that's fine. Thank you. So let me wrap up briefly by just gesturing at the wide range of actual different topics this specific interview question could move toward. So it says, how many different kinds of inequality are there in human social life? That's the beginning. And in a sense, the key word and tricky word here is kinds, deceptively simple. What the question is implying, I think, is that social inequality is not simple, and that there are fundamentally different forms of it, and that we might learn important things about it by dwelling on different forms of it, even in just the brief fleeting context of an interview and an informal conversation. So one level that's fairly obvious that this conversation, this interview might go, would be to kind of like start listing and thinking out loud about levels of personal existence that involve inequality, but that we talk about and identify as somewhat different from each other in everyday life: gender, race, ethnicity, immigration status, employment status, age, class, disability, etc. It's likely and very reasonable that an interviewee would start to talk about any one of those and start to try to reason and talk about interactions between them, distinctions between them, differences between them, how they work, and so on. A conversation could go in a direction, for example, of kind of from those kinds of levels of things, could go in a direction of trying to get a grip on larger, more abstract patterns in how inequality works within and across those. So it might turn into a conversation partly about naturalized forms of inequality versus overt forms of inequality that are overtly recognized as achieved and produced in social life. It might lead in a direction, for example, of trying to reason about distinctions like inequality of inequality of opportunity versus equality or inequality of outcome. Like, is there a difference to be made between the idea of the level playing field versus the idea of how things come out in economic life, for example? More unusual, but of great interest to us at the university level, would be if students were able to start bringing in ideas about comparative variation in how inequality could even work across history, for example, or across different social and cultural settings around the world. So, you know, before the French Revolution in European history, inequality was a matter of blood dominantly. And after the French Revolution, it was a matter of money and capitalism, for example, and accumulation of wealth, or trying to work with distinctions between, for example, something like caste systems versus class systems versus egalitarian societies, or anything like that. These are directions a conversation could go. Our first intuitions are typically going to be to try to be talking about inequality on a kind of person scale level or within a society, but we could also go in directions of talking about macro structural inequalities between different places in the globe and whole different societies, and inequality as a global scale phenomenon. We could go in a completely other direction of talking about the complexities of inequality even in a single relationship, such as the relation between a parent and a child, which if you first start to think about it might look like one thing, but if you start to open it up, inequality and who's got power and so on, and why they've got power and so forth, and what forms of power they've got and so on, what asymmetries there are quite complex and multi-layered even in a single social relation. We could end up talking about temporal scales, you know, so social life is lived on a lot of different temporalities. There's the fleeting here and now of interaction, and that's got complicated organizations of equality and inequality in it and ways that happens. And there's much other kinds of scales of long-term processes and so on. Another level of issues a discussion could get to is normative questions of not just what kind of inequality exists or how, but whether it should exist, how it should exist, how to get rid of it, etc. Those kinds of questions are very prominent in public thinking about inequality and school teaching about inequality, and they're definitely questions the social sciences are interested in. As a caution, I'd say that we're not interested in, again, opinions or arguments about this as goals in their own right. We're most interested in reasoning through about how inequality exists, how it works, before trying to address further normative questions. So the normative conversations are really important and interesting and integral with the questions of like, how does this even work? But don't skip the how does this even work level of reasoning, or what is it even is. So yeah, to sum up, because social processes are very complex and difficult in these fields, we're generally interested in slowing down and getting a grip on that complexity as a first step. And that range of different directions the question could go that I just reviewed quickly is a hint of some of that complexity. And I'll stop there.
Brilliant, thank you, Rupert. I think it's Charles is our...
Hi, am I coming through?
Yes, you are.
Am I
Charles.
coming?
Yeah.
Am I coming through?
Yeah, you're all good.
Good. Right. So the economics interviews, there are 2 interviews, and we have one of these interviews more focused on microeconomics and a bit of maths, and the other one is focused on macroeconomics. So they tend to be a bit different in styles. It's quite a common way to have the 2 interviews set up, and is done at a number of colleges. This is an example of that comes from one of my interviews in the past, a game theory example. As you've seen, it's quite common to have a prop to some specific setting to read and to analyze. So the first thing to do is to read it or listen to it explained and understand this game. So 10 players choose a number between 0 and 99. The person whose chosen number is closest to 2/3 of the median of all chosen numbers wins the game. So you've got to understand that game, what the median is, 2/3 of the median, what the rules are. If you get a mistake, will help you. The most important thing is the analysis of the game, but the first step is always to have a clear understanding of what's being discussed. Imagine you're playing this game with school friends, explain how you would choose a number. So it's quite, this one's quite easy to engage with, because you know, you could have this setting with actual people and you'd have to think of a number, you're trying to win. What are the thoughts that go into your head? What number would you choose in this setting? And then we'd start to ask you why. So there are a lot of good approaches to this question. Probably you know, that there are some bad approaches as well. You might take the approach of saying, you know, I don't know what anyone's going to do, so I'll just guess a random number, or I'll just guess 50. That doesn't really engage very well with the game and a good strategy for trying to win it. You might have an answer which guesses a which says that I think everyone else is going to choose a number randomly between 0 and 99, then the median is going to be about 50, and then I'll choose 33. That would be that would show some engagement. Then we could follow up, and that would lead to further questions on, well, are they actually likely to choose a number between completely randomly between 0 and 99? You start to look at other people's strategy as well, and that would be one angle that the conversation might, or one path that the conversation might go down. Another path that the conversation might go down is that we might ask you if there are any numbers that you might choose that would definitely be poor strategies. And even if everyone chooses 99, then the 2/3 of the median is going to be 66. So the maximum, it doesn't really make sense to choose a strategy greater than 66. So that would take the discussion down another path. And depending on which path we go down, there are various follow-up questions that lead to some theory, and then we would look for how are you thinking about this? Are your ideas any good? But more importantly, can you articulate them in a coherent and sensible way? And then secondly, we're likely to present some theories about this, which we would then see, can you engage with these theories? For example, if you said that you thought everyone else would choose numbers between 0 and 99 completely randomly, so you are then going to choose 2/3 of the median of that, which is 33. If you said that, then that's actually takes you down one path. There's actually a theory that is very similar to that logic, which is a theory of levels of rationality. So then you're saying that everyone else has no rationality, they're choosing things completely randomly, and then you're going to beat them, or you're going to take what they're doing and optimize your strategy against that. And then according to this theory, that is level 1 rationality. But then if other people have level 1 rationality, they're choosing 33, we could then ask what is, if you want to beat them, then you choose 22. So that would be level 2 rationality. We could then introduce this theory, perhaps define it, and then discuss how would a person with a different level of rationality behave. It could also go down the lines of just thinking about how people would play this game if they're extremely strategic. Like, so maybe we imagine that you and your friends were extremely strategic. Maybe you are chess grandmasters or whatever ability to see at many levels of depth. What would happen? And most people would figure out that you get sort of 0 or 1, some very small number that would result from very strategic players. But you could also go down the path of another theory, which is that it doesn't make sense to choose numbers above 66. But if everyone understands that, then actually it doesn't make sense to choose numbers above 2/3 of that, which is 44, because if everyone's choosing up to 66, 2/3 of the median is at most 44. You could go down that path. That would be exploring some other theory. But the important thing is that, first of all, understand the setting. Then you've got to think about how you do it, and then express how you are thinking about the game, how you think other people might play, how you might optimize your strategy. That would then give us some pieces to work with that could lead to some theoretical discussion. And then we look at how does this theory match. We could then discuss how this theory matches against how we expect people to play in reality, how different groups of people would play. So it's actually a game which is very simple, but does actually lead to a lot of possible angles for discussion. And we'd look at how can you articulate your strategy, how well can you engage with a theory. If we define a theory, are you able to say what it implies about the behavior of people who are playing this game? So it's probably a typical example. The examples that we would draw from would, they might be games, they might be other microeconomic settings, they might be situations in the world, in a setting of development, or a setting of labor, or a setting of industrial revolution. The important thing isn't to know anything about them, but to engage with the data, engage with the setting, and then pick up some of the ideas that we might inject and try to work with them in some way. We will be able to tell if you can understand what we're saying, if you enjoy some of the theoretical discussions, if you're having, if you are engaging with the ideas, if further follow-up questions or thoughts are occurring to you. So if that sort of conversation is what the interview process should be. Okay, I think that's all I have to say about this, if there are no questions.
Brilliant, thank you, Charles. Excellent, well, thanks everyone for taking us through those questions. A really wonderful diversity of subjects and topics there. But I mean, there were some, I think, some useful similarities between those and things linking them. I think the key one is, no matter what you're interviewing for, you're going to be presented with a topic, with that topic at your interview. I think there's a common sort of anxiety pre-interview that you might be asked about something completely unrelated to what you're doing, or why you've applied to a certain college, or something that is not related to the academic subject that you're applying to. And I think it is very clear from this is, if you're doing a maths interview, you're going to be asked about maths. You're not going to be asked about something completely unrelated to it. And similarly with whatever subject you're applying to. So preparing in that sense for the subject you're applying to is key. And similarly, you hopefully it's become clear that you might be presented with something you're not 100% familiar with, something you might not know. And although we haven't said it yet, I think, or someone might have said it and I missed it, it is fine to say that you don't know something. It's fine not to know. It's also fine to ask the interviewers to clarify something, to ask a question of the interviewers. I think regardless of the subject, there is a discursive element to all interviews. And there will be a back and forth between interviewer and interviewee. So you should never be worried about, being presented with something you have no idea on. Certainly for history interviewees, often the ones that think they've done the worst have actually done really well, because they're the ones that maybe have asked the most insightful questions. They haven't panicked and sort of tried to blag an answer. They've taken their time. They might have gotten something wrong, but they've pivoted and managed to pull out a really good answer in the end. So yes, in terms of how to prepare, again, I mean, I'm not going to give my own necessarily the entire answer on this. It would be quite useful to know from everyone else in the panel how to prepare for specific subjects, but the sort of basics of how to prepare for an interview is just make sure you're familiar with the course that you're applying to, make sure you're familiar with what kind of themes and subjects are covered in that course. So go to the university website, read through the syllabus and be familiar with that, because those are the sorts of things that you might encounter in the interview. Make sure that you're familiar with everything you've talked about in your personal statement and your submitted work, because if you're doing a humanities or a social sciences interview, you're probably going to end up discussing those at some point. So, if your teacher told you to mention a specific book that you're not necessarily that familiar with, make sure you familiarize yourself with it, because that has happened before. In general, just don't listen to your teacher if they tell you to put something in that you want to put in to talk about. Practice those skills that will be key to your subject, because those are the things that will come up, whether it's maths, whether it's coding, whether it's linguistics, whatever it might be. Does anyone else in the panel have any specific advice on how best to prepare for your interviews for your subjects? Feel free just to unmute.
Make sure you slept enough the night before. I would recommend.
That's a very good point, Wayne. Yes. Be relaxed. Andrew, sorry.
I echo what you're saying. So your main message there, Stuart, is not to feel like we're trying to catch you out. But I know it's really hard. It's easier said than done, but somehow feel relaxed. So actually what Wayne says is get a good night's sleep. Obviously, it's going to be online, so you don't have that worry about travel. We think it's going to be online, right? And then in terms of preparation for linguistics, like I was trying to say in a very hurried way before, yeah, so think about how you use language, what makes language ambiguous and interesting sometimes, why you might want to study it for 3 years. So very often we get, you know, in the personal statement, an applicant might say, oh, I've got this passion for linguistics, but you really need to think how you can justify and explain that, and with examples as well. So your own experience might be multilingual. You might have moved from location to location. So think about how that affects your language development. Your language experience might be multimodal. So, you know, online chats, speaking on video, maybe you know sign language, all that kind of stuff comes into play. So it's not just about studying linguistic puzzles, but also thinking about how language affects you and your experience with it.
I would say also maybe to build on some of the points that have been said already, just tell us what's going on in your head. It's completely normal to be nervous and to just have a complete moment. So just for example, with my question, sometimes people go, oh my word, this is a word I know, but I can't think of it. You know, the big round things that make energy, and that's fine. Just tell me that you're having, I'm sorry, I'm really nervous. I know this, and I'm annoyed with myself. Just if you tell me what's going on in your head, that is the easiest way for me to know. So, and you know, it's fine to be nervous, and just tell me what thing you're stuck on, rather than just sitting there. We won't think you're, you know, you're being stupid or anything. Just tell us how you're working through the problem, and we'll help if we think you need it.
Yeah, really good advice. I mean, as the start of this, oh sorry, Charles, did I cut in on you?
Yeah, when it comes to the reading, generally we find that people who have put readings in their personal statements, they usually have done the reading, so definitely do that. But beyond that, be able to actually articulate what is this reading about, why you found it interesting. If there was anything that's particularly you did find interesting, can you explain it clearly and accurately? Try it on other people, but it's very likely that if you mention something that is unique that you've read, you said you're interested in, it's very likely it'll be come up in discussion. So be prepared to just talk about it, and talk about it intelligently.
Yeah, that's really good advice, I think. I think one of the hardest things lots of people find at interviews is just being able to articulate their thoughts. It's not a skill that a lot of people work on at school, and it's quite a difficult one to learn in a very short period before an interview. So getting used to articulating what you're thinking, and also a way to sort of respond to a question is a really great way to prepare regardless of what you're doing, because as Harriet rightly points out, things will go wrong, you will forget things, you might get something wrong, and it's absolutely fine to do that, but making sure you're articulating this as you go on is good. Similarly, if you find something really interesting or something you really want to talk about, get used to discussing it, because you know, I didn't discuss things at school very much. You know, I didn't talk to my family about things I was interested in. We didn't talk about, you know, the Rabelaisian aspects of EastEnders or something over dinner. Like that wasn't a topic of conversation. So when I got to uni, I found it really hard to talk in seminars and things because I was not used to it. So, you know, whether it's to yourself in the mirror or to your family, just or to your friends or whoever it might be, get into the habit of talking about your subject, whether it's talking through a maths problem or talking about a podcast you liked, and that will help when it comes to the interview. Cool. What's on the next slide? I can't even remember. Yeah, and on the day, we've already said that, I mean, you know, as Wayne said, get some sleep, be relaxed, familiarize yourself with anything you think is important, but don't cram, don't work yourself up too much. You won't be able to control every aspect of the interview. So just relax and it will go fine. Yeah, they will all be online this year. It's worth pointing that out. So for 2022 entry, all interviews are going to be online. That's true at Cambridge and at Oxford. So yes, you can not have to worry about that. You know the answer. Further on in the future, we're not sure. And then on the last slide, I can't remember what it is. Yeah. So what have we covered? The interviews. They're focused, they challenge you, but they're also in many ways a discursive space, a positive way to talk to someone who studies the subject you enjoy, for 20 minutes or more and explore some new problems and new ideas. So they are a fun thing to do. Yeah, and there are lots of ways that you can be challenged in an interview, but as I say, they're pretty much all positive. In terms of preparing, there's lots of ways to prepare, make sure you're familiar. And in the meantime, keep working hard, keep exploring the subject you love, keep developing the skills that we've looked at here. And you'll be in a great position when it comes to the interviews. Does anyone have anything else they want to add on anything like this? Anything interview related, prep related? Are we all pretty happy? Okay, good. We haven't had any more questions come in, and although it is 3 minutes early, I think we can probably finish there then. So thank you to everyone that came along. Thank you to those that asked questions, and thank you most of all to our interviewers, sorry, who have taken us through their questions today. Apologies for the fairly random tech issues at various points of the session, but I think we got through. So yes, it remains to me to say thank you all very much for coming along today. To Rupert, to Wayne, to Harriet, to Andrew, to Charles. Thank you for your guidance. And thank you to the audience as well. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy any more of the sessions that you go to over the next few days for the open days. And if you have any follow-up questions about anything, get in touch with the Sydney admissions team and we can answer them for you. So thank you, everyone. We can go.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye all.